Okay, today we'll discuss what are access points in S3. If you are watching this video, I hope you might have already known what are bucket policies. If you don't know, I just give you a quick recap. Bucket policies are used to restrict or allow access to any user group or a role to access buckets and its objects. For more in-depth and real-world use cases, please watch this video, yaar. It got only 40 views for 40 minutes. I spent nearly 1 week to create that video. Okay, let's consider a scenario. Today, if you want to give a read permissions to some objects for a user, you'll use simply a bucket policy to do that. Okay, tomorrow if you want to give some other permissions to a role, you'll again use this bucket policy. Other day, when you want to give permissions to a group, if you keep on using this bucket policy, this will grow and it's hard to read. That's where access point comes in. Instead of giving permissions to everyone in one bucket policy, you will create individual access points for each one and give permissions to these access points, and all these access points are attached to the bucket. In this way, the bucket policy won't grow. I hope you got an idea of what are these access points. Now it's activity time. Let's consider a scenario. Our bucket and its objects must only be accessed using access point, and that too by a user in the other account. We'll do everything using CLI. For this, I'll take you to my terminal. Now I'm in my terminal. Now I'll write AWS S3 control and hit enter for the auto prompt. Look, there is something called create access point. I'll select that one. Now it was asking my AWS account ID. I'll now go to the console, select the top right corner and select that account ID. I'll now again go back to my terminal. I'll paste my account ID over here. Now this was asking me to assign the name for this access point. I'll name KGF access point. Now it was asking me to provide the bucket name. I'll write korlagautam.1023 and I'll hit enter, and this KGF access point was created now. I'll copy this access point ARN. We'll need this in the future. Now let's grant permissions to this access point. So now what permissions shall we give to this access point? We already have our KGF user, right? For those who didn't watch my previous bucket policy video, I already have a user KGF in my account, and this user doesn't have any IAM permissions. And so for this user, let's give get object and list bucket 2 permissions through this access point. Now let's write access point policy. This is similar to bucket policy. Now I'll take you to my VS Code. This is a basic template for an access point. Principle here is whom we wanted to allow. We wanted to allow the KGF user, right? I have to put the ARN of the KGF user. I'll take you to my terminal again. I'll write AWS IAM and list users and I'll hit enter. Look, here is the ARN of the KGF user. I'll again go back to my VS Code. I'll paste the ARN over here. Now this KGF user is allowed to get object and list bucket. But on what? If this was a bucket policy, then I would have written a bucket ARN as a resource. We wanted to access bucket and its objects using access point, right? And that's why I'll copy this access point ARN and I'll paste this in the resource. We also have a get object action in this access point policy, right? And that's why I'll write /object at the end of the access point. You can specify whatever the object that you wanted to get. For now, I'll write star for all the objects. I'll now save this access point policy. I'll again write AWS S3 control and hit enter. Look, there is something called put access point policy. I'll select that one. It was again asking my account ID. I'll copy from above. I'll paste here. It was asking the name of an access point. I'll write KGF access point. It was asking the policy file. I'll write file : // access point policy that we have just written now was present in the policies folder, and I'll select that access point. I'll hit enter. Okay, there is something wrong with this access point policy. Malformed policy when calling the put access point policy. I'll again open this access point policy. We have an extra space over there in the principal. I'll clear that one. When I save this file, I'll again go to the terminal. I'll copy the same command from the above. I'll paste here. And when I hit enter, the access point policy was successfully saved. So now this KGF user will be having get object and list bucket permission on the bucket to which this access point was attached. So when KGF user tried to access the bucket using AWS S3 ls korlagautam1023 -- profile KGF, look, we got an error because no identity based policy allows list bucket action. As I already said, KGF is a fresh user and this user does not have any IAM permission to access the object. But if KGF user has IAM permissions to access, then we might have got the objects inside this bucket. But we are interested in accessing the objects in the bucket using access point, right? For that, I'll take you to my console. Look, there is something called access point. I'll click on that. I'll now click on the permissions tab. If I now scroll down a little bit, this is the policy that we have just now applied, right, using CLI. And that's fine. I'll go up a little bit. I'll click on the properties tab. And look, there is something called S3 URI. I'll copy that one. I'll again take you to my terminal. I'll now repeat the same command, AWS S3 ls, but instead of the bucket name, I'll paste this access point URI. When I hit enter, again I got same no identity based policy allows list bucket action. Think for 2 minutes. We have given permissions to this KGF user to access the bucket using this access point policy, right? But why this was not working? This is for security purpose. If for suppose, whatever the permissions that you write in the access point policy are allowed, what if someone write delete object? And that's why we have another level of security. In the bucket policy, we can filter out some of the permissions that are flowing from the access point policy. So in the bucket policy, if you don't write permissions for the access point, the permissions mentioned in the access point policy are not allowed. So for this, I'll take you to my VS Code for the bucket policy. This is the basic template of a bucket policy. This allows everyone to perform any S3 action, but on what? We want to perform on the bucket, right? Here we have to put the ARN of the bucket. Now I'm in the console. In the bucket, in the properties tab, we have this ARN of the bucket. Now I'll paste in the resource. I'll also write /star for the objects in the bucket. Now we have to write the condition in this bucket policy such that it allows traffic from access point. Sorry, I don't know how to do it. I'll again go to the console. I'll click on this permissions tab. I'll come down a little bit. I'll click on this edit button. Now I'll click on this policy generator button. It was loading. I'll select bucket policy. I'll write star in the principal. I'll select every action. I'll paste ARN of the bucket in the resource. As we are not interested in the bucket policy, right? We are only interested in this condition. I'll select string equals. I'll go down a little bit. There it is, string equals. I'll now select key as data access point ARN. There it is. And the value is access point ARN. Let's get it through a command. I'll write AWS S3 control list access points. I hope this should work. This didn't work. It was asking account ID. Yes. I'll go up a little bit to find the account ID. There it is. I'll copy that one. I'll paste here. It was now asking me to provide the bucket name. I'll write Korla Gautam 10234. Look, we got the access point that was attached to the bucket. I'll now copy this ARN. I'll now go back to the console. I'll paste this in the value. I'll click this add condition button. I'll click this add statement. I'll now click this generate policy button. Now our bucket policy was generated. I'll just copy the condition. I'll now go back to the VS Code. I'll paste here. Now this is the bucket policy that allows everyone to perform any action on this bucket through this access point. I'll now go back to the terminal. I'll keep pressing this up arrow till I find the command to put this bucket policy. Okay, there is no command. I'll simply write AWS S3 API, put bucket policy, and I hit enter for the auto prompt. It was asking me to provide the bucket name. I'll write Korla Gautam 10234. It was now asking me to provide the policy. I'll write file : policies / this policy 0JSON. Policy 0JSON is our bucket policy. When I hit enter, the bucket policy was successfully saved. Now let's again try accessing the bucket as a KGF user. This is the access point. I'll hit enter. Look, we got object in the bucket. And that's great, and that worked. I'll now remove this access point and I'll simply write Korla Gautam 10234 as a bucket. When I hit enter, look, it gave me error. No identity based policy allows the list bucket action. So using this access point policy, we gave permissions to this KGF user who doesn't have any IAM permissions to access the S3 bucket. Okay, now let's level up. Now let's allow users to access the bucket and its object only through access point. How to do that? If you have already watched my previous bucket policy video, this is a piece of cake for you. I'll now take you to my bucket policy. This bucket policy allows everyone and every action on this bucket through this access point. I'll now copy the above statement. I'll paste here. Now our goal is to allow users to access the bucket and its objects only through access point, right? Now I'll write deny everyone to perform any action on this bucket if string not equals to this access point. So if any user try to access this bucket using normal S3 URI or normal S3 bucket name, this deny statement rejects the request. But we didn't explicitly give any allow permissions to that access point, right? We just simply said deny the request if it doesn't come through an access point. And that's why I have written allow statement above. I hope you understood. I'll now save this file. I'll paste the same AWS S3 API put bucket policy and I hit enter, and this bucket policy was successfully saved. Okay, now let's test. I'll simply write AWS S3 ls s3:/ and my bucket name. This command was executed as a root user. When I hit enter, look, I got explicit deny. Okay, now I'll try to access the bucket using access point. I'll now remove this -- profile KGF. When I hit enter, look, I got an object. I'll now repeat the same command and execute this command as a KGF user. When I hit enter, I got an object. So now what we did, we allowed users to access the bucket only using access point, right? So now let's again level up. Now let's allow user from the other account to access the bucket. Now I'll again take you to my VS Code. There is nothing to do with the bucket policy. This bucket policy allows traffic from the access point. I'll now navigate to the access point. If you think by putting the ARN of the user in the other account as a principal here, then
you are mistaken.
This is not enough. We have to do a couple of things more than that. Now I'll take you to my console, and this is one of my friend's account. Here in this account there is only one user called Gautam. I'll click on that user. I'll copy this ARN of this user, and there are two policies that are attached to this user, and I'll click on one of the policy. Yes, this is a policy that was attached to this user. What this policy do? This policy allows any kind of S3 operations on this KGF access point which is in my account, and I am giving permissions to access the access point which is present in my account to this Gautam user in this account. I'll click continue, and there is one more policy attached. I'll click on that. I'll now click on this S3. This is the policy attached. Now this policy allows list bucket and get object permissions on the bucket which is in my account. Okay, these are the two policies that are attached to this user Gautam in this account. Without these policies, this user Gautam in the other account will not be able to access the bucket in my account. I'll again go to the access point policy. I'll paste the ARN of the user that I have copied before. So okay, what's wrong with this? Okay, there are two ARNs, right? These must be in array. Okay, I think that's it. I'll save the file. I'll now take you to my terminal. There is a user called Gautam Ali that corresponds to the user Gautam in the other account. I have already configured that using the security credentials of the Gautam user. Without applying the access point policy, if I run this command, look, I got straight away access denied error. I'll now upload this access point policy. I'll write AWS S3 control. There it is. When I hit enter, the policy was successfully saved. I repeat the same command, AWS S3 ls Gautam Ali user. Yes, I got object in the bucket. Okay, I'll repeat the same AWS S3 ls command. I'll remove the access point. I'll just put the bucket name Korla Gautam 1023. When I hit enter, straight away access denied. And that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. In the next video, we'll look at S3 encryption. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.